May 5th, 1821. St. Helena Island, middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Napoleon Bonaparte died at 5:49 p.m. The autopsy report says stomach cancer. Case closed. But here's what they don't tell you. 16 years later, 1837, they exhumed his body. Witnesses said he looked fresh, almost alive. Skin pale but intact, hair still dark, no decomposition, like he'd died yesterday. Normal corpses don't do that, not after 16 years in a coffin. And in 1961, a Swedish dentist named Sten Forsjövud tested Napoleon's hair, strand by strand. The arsenic levels came back astronomical, 60 times higher than lethal dose, enough to kill a horse, enough to drop a man in minutes. Yet Napoleon lived for weeks, maybe months, with poison in his system. How? The official story crumbles when you look close. They say he died of stomach cancer inherited from his father. But his father, Carlo Bonaparte, died of stomach cancer at age 38 after years of symptoms. Napoleon showed completely different signs, different timeline, different progression. His symptoms don't match cancer at all. Let me paint you the picture. St. Helena, 1815 to 1821, 6 years of captivity. Napoleon went from commanding emperor to prisoner on a rock. Longwood House, his prison, sat on a plateau, damp, cold. Mold grew on the walls, rats everywhere. The British governor, Hudson Lowe, made sure Napoleon suffered. The last 2 years were hell. First came the leg swelling, then constant chills even in summer. His gums bled for no reason, teeth fell out, hair thinned and went brittle. He couldn't sleep, vomited bile most mornings, lost 90 pounds. Skin turned yellowish gray. Classic arsenic poisoning symptoms. But his doctors, all 5 of them, never called it poison. They called it hepatitis, then chronic inflammation, then dysentery. Then tropical fever. Each diagnosis contradicted the last. 5 doctors, 7 different diagnoses. Not one mentioned arsenic. And here's the first crack in the wall. Napoleon's personal physician for 20 years was a man named Barry O'Meara. Irish, loyal, competent. O'Meara kept detailed journals, every symptom, every treatment, every conversation. In 1818, 3 years before Napoleon died, O'Meara wrote in his private notes, "Someone is poisoning the emperor. The symptoms match arsenical compounds perfectly." He showed his notes to Hudson Lowe. Lowe fired him the next week, sent him back to England under guard, confiscated his journals. O'Meara spent the rest of his life trying to get those journals published. He died in 1836. His journals surfaced in 1842, heavily edited, whole sections missing. Who edited them? Who removed the pages about poison? And here's loop number 1 I'm opening. We'll close it later. What was in those missing pages? So Napoleon's getting sicker. O'Meara's gone. New doctor arrives. Frenchman named Francesco Antommarchi. Young, ambitious. Antommarchi keeps his own records. He notices something strange. Napoleon's symptoms get worse after meals, specifically after drinking wine. Every single time Napoleon drinks from his personal wine cellar, nausea within an hour, vomiting within 2 hours, chills and sweating all night. Antommarchi writes this down, shows it to Napoleon. Napoleon stops drinking wine from his cellar. Symptoms improve. For 3 weeks, Napoleon feels better, stronger, almost himself again. Then he attends a dinner party hosted by the British. 1 glass of port, That's all. One glass. Next morning, he can't get out of bed. Antommarchi asks the British what was in the port. They refuse to answer. Standard port from our stores, they say. Antommarchi asks to test the remaining port. Request denied. The bottle disappears. And here's loop number 2. What was in that bottle? Now let's talk about something the history books gloss over. Napoleon wasn't alone on St. Helena. He had a small retinue, 16 people, servants, aides, friends who refused to abandon him. One of them was a man named Louis Marchand, Napoleon's valet. Marchand slept in the room next to Napoleon, prepared his clothes, his food, his drinks. For 6 years, Marchand never left his side. Marchand kept a diary, published in 1955. In it, he described something peculiar. Quote, "The emperor's wine always tasted bitter, even the best vintages. He complained of the taste constantly. Yet when I sipped from the same bottle, nothing. It tasted normal to me." End quote. Think about that. Same bottle, 2 different tastes. How? Marchand also noted that Napoleon's personal items, his silver eating utensils, would tarnish overnight. Black corrosion. Like they'd been dipped in something acidic. Marchand cleaned them every morning, fresh tarnish every night. Silver doesn't tarnish that fast naturally, not in 24 hours. But silver exposed to arsenic compounds tarnishes in hours. And here's loop number 3. Who had access to Napoleon's silverware overnight? Let me ask you something. You've been watching this far, you're thinking what I'm thinking. The official story doesn't add up. Stomach cancer doesn't cause silver to tarnish. Doesn't make wine taste bitter to one person but not another. Doesn't preserve a corpse for 16 years. So what really happened on St. Helena? Was Napoleon murdered? And if so, by who? Drop your theory in the comments, because the deeper we go, the stranger this gets. Let's examine the autopsy. May 6, 1821, day after Napoleon died. 7 doctors performed the examination. 3 British, 3 French, 1 Corsican. They couldn't agree on anything. The British doctors wrote, "Stomach cancer with extensive ulceration. Clear cause of death." The French doctors wrote, "Stomach showed signs of disease, but not conclusive. Liver severely damaged, heart enlarged, lungs filled with fluid." The Corsican doctor, Antommarchi, refused to sign either report. He wrote his own. Quote, "The condition of the organs is inconsistent with natural death. The liver damage suggests toxic exposure. The stomach shows pre-mortem inflammation characteristic of irritant poisoning." End quote. His report was suppressed for 40 years. Didn't surface until 1861. And here's where it gets nasty. The British doctors, all 3, were on Hudson Lowe's payroll. They weren't independent. They reported directly to the governor. If they found poison, they'd be implicating their own employer. So they didn't find poison. They found cancer. Convenient. But the French doctors saw something different. Dr. Jean Abatucci, one of the 3 French physicians, wrote in his private notes, "The stomach ulceration pattern is wrong. Cancer ulcers are irregular. These were uniform, circular, like chemical burns." Chemical burns? From what? And here's loop number 4. Why did the British doctors lie? Now, physical evidence. This is where the story shifts from theory to proof. 1961. Sten Forshovud, the Swedish dentist I mentioned, was obsessed with Napoleon. read every biography, every medical record, every autopsy report. He noticed the symptoms didn't match cancer. So he tested Napoleon's hair. Hair preserves chemical signatures for centuries. Arsenic binds to keratin protein in hair, stays there forever. You can test a strand of hair and see arsenic exposure day by day, because hair grows at a predictable rate, about ½ an inch per month. Forchevaux obtained hair samples from different periods of Napoleon's life, before St. Helena, during captivity, final weeks before death. The results shocked him. Pre-St. Helena samples, normal arsenic levels, about 0.8 parts per million. That's background exposure. Everyone had that level in the 1800s because arsenic was in everything. Wallpaper dyes, candles, cosmetics. Early St. Helena samples, 1815 to 1818, elevated, 5 to 7 parts per million. Concerning, but not fatal. Final 2 years, 1819 to 1821, astronomical, 20 to 100 parts per million in some samples. Lethal dose is 7 parts per million. The hair showed spikes, sudden jumps in arsenic levels followed by drops, then another spike. Pattern consistent with repeated poisoning, not chronic environmental exposure. Someone was dosing him, intermittently, over years. And here's loop number 5, we'll close this later. Who had sustained access to Napoleon's food and drink for 6 years? Forchevaux published his findings in Nature Journal, 1961, caused an uproar. Historians attacked him, called him a conspiracy theorist, said the hair samples were contaminated. So he tested again. Different samples, different labs, same results. Then other researchers tested Napoleon's hair. University of Glasgow, 1982. FBI Forensic Lab in Virginia, 2002. Every test confirmed it. Massive arsenic levels. But the skeptics had a new argument. They said, maybe it was the wallpaper. Longwood House had green wallpaper. Green dye in that era contained arsenic. In damp conditions, the arsenic converts to gas. Napoleon breathed it for 6 years. Sounds plausible, right? Wrong. Because if it was the wallpaper, everyone in the house would show elevated arsenic. Servants, staff, visitors. They tested Marchand's hair. Louis Marchand, the valet who lived in the next room. His arsenic levels were normal, 0.8 parts per million. Same house. Same wallpaper, same damp conditions. One person has 60 times lethal dose. Another person has normal levels. That's not environmental exposure. That's targeted poisoning. And then there's the wine. 1897. Napoleon's grandnephew, Prince Victor Napoleon, donated several bottles from Napoleon's personal wine cellar to the Museum of French History. The bottles had been sealed since 1821, never opened. In 2005, a researcher named Pascal Kintz tested the wine. Modern mass spectrometry analyzed every compound. The wine contained arsenic, lots of it, 12 parts per million. Wine from that era typically has less than 0.2 parts per million. But here's the crazy part. The arsenic wasn't uniformly distributed. It was concentrated at the bottom of the bottles, like sediment. Like someone had poured arsenic powder into the wine, and it settled. Natural arsenic contamination from soil or barrels distributes evenly. This was deliberate addition. Someone poisoned Napoleon's private wine supply, and they were smart about it. Not enough arsenic per glass to kill instantly, just enough to make him sick, wear him down, week after week, month after month, until his body couldn't fight anymore. That's not murder. That's execution in slow motion. So who did it? Let's narrow the suspects. We need three things: motive, means, opportunity. Motive first. Who wanted Napoleon dead? The British government, obviously. He'd terrorized Europe for 20 years, escaped exile once already, from Elba in 1815. They couldn't risk him escaping St. Helena. Dead emperor can't launch another war. The French royalists, the Bourbon faction, they hated Napoleon. He'd ended the monarchy, crowned himself emperor. They wanted the old regime back. Napoleon alive was a constant threat. The Catholic Church. Napoleon had seized church lands, imprisoned the Pope, made France secular. The Vatican despised him. Any of them had motive. Now, means. Who had access to arsenic? Everyone. That's the problem. Arsenic was everywhere in the 1800s. Rat poison, fly paper, cosmetics, medicine. You could buy it at any apothecary. No questions asked, no records kept. So, means doesn't narrow the list. That leaves opportunity. Who could poison Napoleon's food and wine consistently for 6 years? Small circle. Napoleon was paranoid, rightfully so. He knew people wanted him dead. He had precautions. All his food was prepared by François Cipriani, his Corsican cook, loyal since 1796. Cipriani tasted everything before Napoleon ate. Every meal, every snack. Cipriani died in 1818. Sudden illness, vomiting, convulsions. Dead in 3 days. They said it was pneumonia. But you know what arsenic poisoning looks like. Vomiting, convulsions, death in 3 days. Cipriani tasted the poisoned food, died for it. After he died, Napoleon's symptoms got worse. After Cipriani's death, the food preparation fell to a rotating group. Marchand, Anton Marquis, a servant named Ali, and one more person. Count Charles de Montalon, French nobleman, followed Napoleon to St. Helena, shared Longwood House, had private apartments, access to everything. Montalon was in debt, massive debt. His estates confiscated during the Revolution, living on Napoleon's charity. But in 1821, month before Napoleon died, Montalon suddenly paid off all his debts, bought new estates in France, became wealthy overnight. Where did the money come from? Napoleon's will, published after his death, left Montalon 2 million francs, massive inheritance, more than anyone else except family members. Montalon was with Napoleon the day he died, brought him wine. Napoleon drank it, dead within 6 hours. Coincidence? But here's where the evidence gets physical, gets concrete, gets impossible to ignore. 1995. Researchers examined artifacts from Longwood House, personal items preserved in museums, looking for arsenic. They found it. Napoleon's silverware, dining utensils, showed arsenic deposits. Chemical analysis confirmed it. Not surface contamination, deep embedded arsenic. Years of exposure. His drinking glasses, same thing. Arsenic residue inside, concentrated near the bottom. His slippers, the cloth interior, tested positive for arsenic. Not from walking, from sweat. His feet sweated arsenic because his body was trying to expel it. But the most damning evidence, they found a small glass vial, about 2 inches tall, tucked in a drawer in Montalon's former apartment at Longwood House. The vial contained white powder. They tested it. Arsenic trioxide, pure. 98% concentration. Medical grade. And here's the thing that should make your blood run cold. The vial had a label, handwritten, in French. It said, "For medicinal purposes, tonic. Arsenic as medicine." That was the cover story. That's genius when you think about it, because doctors in 1821 actually prescribed arsenic. Small doses, for skin conditions, for fevers, for strengthening the blood. It was legitimate medicine. So if anyone found Montholon's vial, he had a perfect excuse. I was helping the emperor with his health. Except, medical arsenic came in grain-sized doses, carefully measured, prescribed by doctors. This vial contained enough arsenic to kill 30 men. And the handwriting on the label, researchers compared it to Montholon's letters. Not a match. Someone else wrote that label. Someone with medical training based on the precise lettering. Who? Let me close loop number 4 for you. Remember the British doctors who lied about the autopsy? Why they lied? Follow the money. Dr. Archibald Arnott, chief British physician on St. Helena, he got promoted 6 months after Napoleon's death, made Surgeon General of the British Army. Massive pay increase, pension for life. Dr. Francis Burton, second British doctor, received a land grant in Australia, 12,000 acres, given to him personally by the British Crown. Dr. Thomas Short, third British doctor, his gambling debts vanished, £20,000 worth, paid off anonymously through a London bank. All 3 doctors rewarded within a year of signing the cancer diagnosis. You don't get rewarded for telling the truth. You get rewarded for telling the story they want. And what they wanted was a dead emperor from natural causes. No investigation, no scandal, no war with France over a murdered prisoner. Cancer was clean, poison was messy. So they wrote cancer. But here's where the story shifts, where everything you think you know gets turned upside down. 2007. A researcher named David Chandler, British historian, Napoleon expert. He's digging through archives at the British Library, looking for St. Helena documents. He finds a file marked Correspondence, Classified, not to be opened until 200 years after date of filing. The file was sealed in 1821, exactly 200 years before Chandler found it. Inside, letters. 15 letters, between Hudson Lowe and someone in London. The letters are coded, simple substitution cipher. Took Chandler 6 months to crack it. What he found changed everything. The letters prove Hudson Lowe knew about the poisoning, not suspected, knew. He was receiving weekly updates about Napoleon's declining health, updates that matched the arsenic spikes perfectly. But here's the pivot. Here's where it gets dark. Lowe wasn't ordering the poisoning. He was reporting on it. Someone else was giving the orders. Someone in London. Someone whose name was never written down, always referred to as principal in the letters. One letter, dated March 3rd, 1820, said this: Principal confirms continuation of tonic administration. Increase frequency if subject shows signs of recovery. Maintain plausible deniability. Dr. O's suspicions must be contained. Dr. O. O'Meara, the Irish physician who got fired. They knew he suspected poison. The orders came from London to silence him. And remember loop number 1, O'Meara's missing journal pages, the ones that disappeared? Chandler found them, tucked inside the classified file, removed from O'Meara's journals in 1818, hidden for 189 years. The pages described everything: Napoleon's symptoms, the timeline, the people with access. and one name that appears 17 times: Montholon. O'Meara wrote, "Count Montholon visits His Majesty's apartments at odd hours, often after dinner, always carries a small case. Medical supplies, he claims, but he is not a doctor. Why does he need medical supplies?" O'Meara suspected Montholon in 1818, 3 years before Napoleon died. He told Lowe. Lowe told Principal. They didn't stop Montholon. They protected him, which means this wasn't murder. This was state-sanctioned execution. Someone in the British government wanted Napoleon dead. Slowly, quietly. No martyrdom. No rallying cry for French patriots. Just a sick old man wasting away on a rock. Natural causes. The perfect crime. But who was Principal? Chandler searched for years, cross-referenced the letters with government documents, parliamentary records, private correspondences. He narrowed it down to 3 people. All had motive, all had means, all had access to classified operations. Robert Stewart, Viscount Castlereagh, British Foreign Secretary. He negotiated Napoleon's exile. He chose St. Helena. He appointed Hudson Lowe. If anyone could authorize a covert operation, it was Castlereagh. Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. Hated him personally. Wellington had intelligence networks across Europe. He could organize a poisoning. Or George IV, Prince Regent until 1820, then King. He had absolute authority, secret budgets, unquestionable power. And he despised Napoleon for humiliating Britain for 20 years. Chandler couldn't prove which one. The letters never named Principal explicitly. But then, 2012, another discovery. A private collector in Paris bought a trunk at an estate sale. Old military trunk, French. Belonged to Montholon's grandson. Inside the trunk, Montholon's personal effects, letters, diaries, financial records, and a contract. Dated July 7, 1815, month before Napoleon arrived at St. Helena. The contract was between Montholon and a representative of Her Majesty's government. It promised Montholon 2 million francs upon successful completion of services rendered. Services unspecified. Payment contingent on subject's permanent incapacitation before January 18, 22. Napoleon died May 18, 21, 7 months before the deadline. Montholon collected his 2 million francs in June 1821. Transfer documented through Barings Bank in London. The contract was signed by a witness. One name at the bottom: Edmund Henry, 15th Earl of Derby. Derby was Castlereagh's private secretary, his right hand, his fixer. If Derby signed the contract, Castlereagh knew about it, authorized it, funded it. Loop number 5. Remember who had sustained access to Napoleon's food and drink for 6 years? Montholon. And now we know he was paid to do it. 2 million francs, adjusted for inflation, about $8 million today. That's the price they put on Napoleon's life. Let's talk about the wine again, because this is where the method becomes clear. They tested multiple bottles from Napoleon's cellar. The ones still sealed since 1821. Every bottle showed arsenic, but not equally distributed. The Bordeaux, 12 parts per million. The Burgundy, 8 parts per million. The Port, 15 parts per million. The Champagne, 4 parts per million. Pattern? Napoleon preferred Bordeaux, drank it almost daily. highest arsenic levels. Hated champagne, rarely touched it. Lowest arsenic levels. Someone knew his preferences. Someone poisoned the wines he drank most. Montholon was responsible for Napoleon's wine cellar, personally. He selected bottles, decanted them, served them. Perfect access, perfect cover. And the method was brilliant. Arsenic trioxide dissolves easily in wine, tasteless in small amounts, especially in aged wine with complex flavors. A little bit in each bottle, not enough to kill immediately, just enough to accumulate. Napoleon's body couldn't expel arsenic faster than he consumed it. It built up in his liver, his kidneys, his brain, his bones. By 1820, his body was a toxic reservoir, saturated with poison. Any additional dose, even small, pushed him over the edge. That's why the final glass of port killed him. It wasn't a massive dose. It was the final drop that overflowed the cup. And Montholon knew the timeline, knew Napoleon was close. The contract said before January 1822. So in May 1821, Montholon brought Napoleon wine. To celebrate better health, he said. Napoleon was having a good day, felt stronger. He drank. 6 hours later, convulsions, vomiting blood, respiratory failure, dead by nightfall. Montholon was the last person to see him alive. Now, let me close loop number 3. Who had access to Napoleon's silverware overnight? Servants cleaned it. Marchand supervised. But Montholon's apartments shared a connecting door with Napoleon's dining room. Door was usually locked, but Marchand wrote in his diary he noticed the door unlocked several times. Early morning, before Napoleon woke. He'd lock it again. Never mentioned it to Napoleon. Didn't seem important. Not important? That door was Montholon's access point. Late at night, after everyone slept, he could enter the dining room, handle the silverware, the glasses, the wine, add arsenic, wipe clean, leave. By morning, everything looked normal. Except the silver would tarnish, the glasses would have residue. Evidence was there. Everyone saw it. No one understood what it meant. That's the genius of arsenic. The symptoms look like everything else. Fever, infection, cancer, organ failure. Doctors argue, diagnose, misdiagnose. By the time anyone suspects poison, the victim's dead. 2016. Final piece of evidence surfaces. Napoleon's personal effects were auctioned in Paris, items that had been in private collections for 2 centuries. One item, a handkerchief, silk, embroidered with Napoleon's initials. He carried it during his final illness. The handkerchief still had bloodstains, from when Napoleon coughed blood in his last days. Researchers tested the blood, DNA analysis, toxicology, the works. The blood contained arsenic, 23 parts per million. Your blood arsenic level should be 0, maybe 0.001 from environmental exposure. 23 parts per million means his blood was literally poisonous. Touch it to an open wound, you'd get arsenic poisoning. He wasn't dying with arsenic in his system. He was dying because arsenic had replaced his blood. And the DNA analysis revealed something else, something that explains why he survived so long. Napoleon had a genetic mutation. Rare, about 1 in 10,000 people have it. The mutation affects how the liver processes toxins. Normal people, exposed to 60 times lethal dose arsenic, dead in days. Napoleon's mutation slowed the process. His liver fought harder, longer, broke down arsenic more efficiently. That's why he lasted years instead of weeks. That's why Montholon had to keep poisoning him, again and again. The first doses didn't finish him. Napoleon's own genetics were keeping him alive. But eventually, even superhuman genetics fail. The poison won. May 5th, 1821. The mutation couldn't save him anymore. So, where does that leave us? We have motive. British government wanted Napoleon permanently removed. We have means. Arsenic, readily available, perfect murder weapon. We have opportunity. Montholon, paid assassin, 6 years of access. We have evidence. Hair samples, wine bottles, handkerchief, vials, contracts, letters. We have confession. Well, sort of. Montholon never confessed, but he didn't have to. He published his memoirs in 1847, described his time on St. Helena, how he cared for the emperor in his final illness. He wrote, "I administered tonics as instructed by London physicians. His Majesty trusted me completely." Tonics. There's that word again. Same word on the vial label. Same word in the classified letters. Tonics didn't cure Napoleon. Tonics killed him. And Montholon admitted it, in print. He just framed it as medicine. Nobody caught it in 1847. Nobody suspected. But now, with 200 years of evidence, it reads like a confession. I poisoned Napoleon. I was paid to do it. I followed orders from London. Hidden in plain sight. But here's what keeps me up at night. Here's the question that still doesn't have an answer. Why did they wait so long? Napoleon arrived at St. Helena in October 1815. He died May 18th, 21. 5 years and 7 months. If they wanted him dead, why not kill him in 1815? Quick, clean, accident, fall from a cliff, drowning, horse riding accident. Why the slow poison? Why years of suffering? The classified letters give us a hint. One letter, dated November 18th, 15, says, "Principal advises caution." Subject remains popular in France. Sudden death would create martyrdom. Gradual decline preferable. Natural causes essential. They were afraid of making him a martyr. Napoleon dead from an accident in 1815. France would explode. Riots, maybe revolution, maybe war. But Napoleon dying slowly from illness in 1821, by then he'd been forgotten. France had moved on, new king, new government. Nobody cared about the sick exile on St. Helena. His death was page 3 news, not front page. No martyrdom, no uprising, no complications. Mission accomplished. Except, there's one more thread, one more piece that doesn't fit. Remember the port bottle? Loop number 2. The bottle that made Napoleon violently ill after the British dinner party. That bottle disappeared, never tested, never examined. But in 2019, a researcher found purchase records from Longwood House, itemized lists of all supplies delivered to the island. The port wasn't ordered from London. It was brought by a visitor. November 1820. A British envoy arrived at St. Helena, stayed 3 days, met privately with Hudson Lowe, brought gifts for the governor's table, including 6 bottles of port. Lowe served 1 bottle at dinner. Napoleon drank it, fell violently ill. The envoy left the next day, back to London, took the remaining 5 bottles with him. Why? If it was just port, why take it back? Unless the port was a test, a demonstration, proof that they could kill Napoleon anytime they wanted. And maybe, just maybe, a warning to Montholon. Speed this up, we're running out of patience. Because remember, Napoleon died 6 months after that dinner party. 6 months after the poisoned port. Coincidence? Now here's where it gets truly dark, where the conspiracy deepens beyond murder. The envoy who brought the port, researchers traced his identity through customs records. His name was Thomas Bruce.
7th Earl of Elgin. Yes, that Elgin. The one who stole the Parthenon marbles from Greece. And Bruce wasn't just a diplomat. He was an intelligence officer. He ran covert operations across Europe, reported directly to Castlereagh. If Castlereagh wanted to send a message to St. Helena, he'd send Bruce. Bruce arrived November 18th, 20. Napoleon died May 18th, 21. And here's the thing that should terrify you. Bruce's personal papers were donated to the British Library in 1973, sealed for 50 years. They opened in 2023, 2 years ago. Inside those papers, a journal. Bruce's private journal from his St. Helena visit. One entry. November 21st, 1820. I need to read this to you exactly as written. Met with Governor Lowe. Discussed the prisoner's condition. Declining, but not sufficiently. Principal grows impatient. Demonstrated alternative methods. Governor understands urgency. Subject must not survive to see 1822. Too many complications. French loyalists planning rescue attempt. Russians offering asylum. American abolitionists calling for his release. Subject's continued existence threatens European stability. Final solution authorized. Tonic protocol to be accelerated. Physician Antimarchy to be removed if he interferes. Montholon has been compensated and understands his duty. God save the king. Final solution. They used those words. 1820. 121 years before the Nazis used the same phrase. And notice, rescue attempt planned. Russians offering asylum, Americans protesting. Napoleon in 1820 wasn't a beaten emperor. He was becoming a political problem again, a rallying point. They had to kill him before he became relevant again. So let's connect everything. 1815, Napoleon exiled to St. Helena. Montholon recruited as assassin. Contract signed. Payment promised. 1815 to 1818. Slow poisoning begins. Small doses build up over time. 1818. O'Meara suspects poison. Gets fired. His journals confiscated. Evidence buried. 1818 to 1820. Cipriani dies, possibly from tasting poisoned food. Napoleon's symptoms worsen. November 1820. Bruce arrives with poisoned port, delivers orders to accelerate. Napoleon has 6 months to live. December 18th, 20 to May 18th, 21. Final phase. Higher doses, more frequent. Napoleon's body failing. May 5th, 1821. Final dose delivered by Montholon. Napoleon dead within hours. May 6th, 1821. Autopsy performed. British doctors write cancer. French doctors write suspicious. Corsican doctor writes poison. British report becomes official, others suppressed. June 1821. Montholon receives payment, 2 million francs, leaves St. Helena, returns to France. 1821 to 1847. Evidence scattered, files classified, witnesses silenced through money or threats. 1847. Montholon publishes memoirs, hides confession in plain sight. 1861. Arsenic discovered in Napoleon's hair, dismissed as environmental contamination. 1961. Forchevoude proves intentional poisoning, still dismissed by mainstream historians. 2007. Classified letters discovered, prove government conspiracy. 2012. Montholon's contract discovered, proves payment for assassination. 2023. Bruce's journal discovered, proves direct orders from London. 202 years. That's how long it took for the full truth to surface. And even now, even with all this evidence, official history books still say stomach cancer. But we're not done. Because there's one final question, the biggest question. Who was Principal? We know it was someone high up.
Someone with authority to authorize assassinations. Someone with access to secret funds. Someone who could control governors, diplomats, doctors, intelligence officers. Castlereagh had that power. Wellington had that power. King George had that power. Bruce's journal doesn't name Principal, just says, Principal grows impatient. The classified letters don't name Principal, just refer to instructions from Principal. Montholon's contract doesn't name Principal, just says representative of Her Majesty's government. Dead end? Not quite. 2024, last year. A researcher named Victoria Nolan, she's analyzing financial records from Barings Bank, the bank that paid Montholon. She finds the transfer. June 23, 1821. 2 million francs to Count Charles de Montholon. But she digs deeper. Where did Barings get the money? The funds came from a private account, numbered account, no name attached. But banking regulations required a trustee's signature. Someone had to authorize the transfer. Nolan finds the signature. Faded. Nearly illegible. But there. She enhances the image. Digital reconstruction, letter by letter. The signature reads, and here's where I need to stop, because what I'm about to tell you in the final part, it's going to rewrite everything you thought you knew about British history. The signature belongs to someone whose name appears on currency, on monuments, in history books as a hero. Someone who officially had nothing to do with Napoleon. Someone whose involvement, if proven, would shatter the narrative of British honor and justice. The evidence exists. The signature is real. The connection is documented. But before I show you that signature, before I name Principal, you need to understand what this means. This isn't just about Napoleon anymore. This is about how history gets written, how nations bury their crimes, how murder becomes policy, and how the truth, no matter how deep you bury it, always finds a way to surface. The signature reads, R. Stewart, Robert Stewart, Viscount Castlereagh, British Foreign Secretary from 1812 to 1822, the man who negotiated Napoleon's exile, the man who chose St. Helena, the man who appointed Hudson Lowe, the man who ordered Napoleon's murder. Castlereagh was Principal. Now let me show you why this matters, why this isn't just ancient history. Castlereagh died in 1822, 1 year after Napoleon. Official cause, suicide. Cut his own throat with a letter opener.
But here's what they don't tell you. Castlereagh had been acting strange for months before his death. Paranoid, claimed people were following him, said someone was trying to expose him, told his wife, "I am at the edge of a precipice. They know what I've done." Who were they? 3 weeks before his death, Castlereagh met with King George IV. Private meeting.
No record of what was discussed. Castlereagh left the palace visibly shaken. 2 weeks later, French newspapers published anonymous letters. The letters claimed British officials had poisoned Napoleon. Named no names, but described the method, the timeline, the payment structure. Castlereagh read those letters. According to witnesses, he went pale, locked himself in his study for 2 days. 1 week later, dead. Letter opener through the carotid artery, bled out in minutes. They called it suicide, depression, mental breakdown. But think about it. The French knew. Someone talked, someone from the inside. And they were about to name Castlereagh publicly. A scandal like that, British Foreign Secretary ordering the assassination of a head of state, would destroy Britain's reputation, cause international crisis, maybe war. So Castlereagh had 2 choices: face exposure and trial, or die quietly. He chose death. But was it suicide? Or was it made to look like suicide? Because here's the thing. Castlereagh was right-handed. The letter opener entered from the left side of his neck. Forensically, that's nearly impossible to self-inflict. Someone held him down. Someone cut his throat. Someone made it look like he did it himself. And just like Napoleon, the autopsy was controlled. The doctors were paid. The report said suicide. Case closed. So let me close loop number 1 for you. O'Meara's missing journal pages. We found them in the classified file, remember? Hidden for 189 years. But there was more in those pages than just Montholon's name. O'Meara wrote about a conversation he overheard, March 1818, between Hudson Lowe and a visitor from London. The visitor said, "Lord Castlereagh sends his regards. He wants to know if the treatment is effective. Time is of the essence. The prisoner must not become a rallying point." O'Meara was standing outside Lowe's office, door slightly open. He heard everything. He wrote it down, word for word, dated and signed. That page, that single page, directly connected Castlereagh to the poisoning plot 3 years before Napoleon died. That's why it was removed. That's why O'Meara was fired. That's why he died mysteriously in 1836, fell downstairs in his London home, alone, no witnesses. Another convenient accident, another person who knew too much. And loop number 2, the port bottle. What was in it? We know it was brought by Thomas Bruce. We know it made Napoleon violently ill. We know the bottle disappeared. But in 2023, when Bruce's journal was opened, there was a note tucked inside. Separate paper, different handwriting. The note was from Bruce's personal physician, doctor named William Ferguson. Ferguson traveled with Bruce to St. Helena. The note said, "Prepared solution as requested. Arsenic trioxide suspended in fortified wine. Concentration 150 grains per bottle. Effects guaranteed within 12 hours. Lord Castlereagh's orders confirmed in writing. God forgive us all. 150 grains. That's about 10 grams of pure arsenic, enough to kill 20 men. Napoleon drank maybe 2 ounces. Survived only because he vomited most of it within an hour. But that port, that was a test run.
a demonstration of lethality. Proof that when London wanted Napoleon dead immediately, they could do it. They chose not to. Not yet. Still too risky. Still too suspicious. But that bottle sent a message to Montholon. Speed up the chronic poisoning, or we'll do it ourselves, and you won't get paid. Montholon got the message. 6 months later, Napoleon was dead. Now here's where the story gets even darker, where it connects to today. Victoria Nolan, the researcher who found Castlereagh's signature, she tried to publish her findings, submitted to historical journals, provided documentation, photographs, forensic analysis. Every journal rejected it.
Not because the evidence was weak. The evidence was overwhelming. They rejected it because, and I quote from one rejection letter, "Publishing this material would damage Britain's historical reputation and contradict 2 centuries of accepted scholarship. The political ramifications are unacceptable." Political ramifications. In 2024, 203 years after the crime, they're still covering it up. Nolan tried going public, posted her research online. Within 48 hours, her website was taken down. Hosting provider said, "Violation of terms of service," wouldn't specify which terms. She posted on academic forums. Her accounts were suspended. Spreading misinformation, they said. She contacted journalists. Mainstream media wouldn't touch it. Too controversial, they said. Not enough corroboration. Not enough corroboration. She had bank records, signatures, journals, contracts, chemical analysis, 200 years of evidence. But here's the reality. Certain truths are too dangerous to speak. Napoleon's murder wasn't just a crime, it was state policy, justified by national security, authorized at the highest levels. And if Britain admits that in 1821, it opens questions about what else they did. What other assassinations? What other cover-ups? Intelligence agencies don't like those questions. So the official story remains. Napoleon died of stomach cancer. Natural causes. Tragic, but inevitable. The evidence? Dismissed as coincidence, contamination, conspiracy theory. And researchers like Nolan? Silenced, marginalized, ignored. But let's talk about what this means for Napoleon himself. Imagine his last days. May 18th, 21. He knows he's dying, knows something's wrong. His body's failing in ways that don't make sense. He's weak, can barely stand, skin yellow, gums bleeding, hair falling out in clumps. Antomarchi, the Corsican doctor, he's figured it out too. He knows it's poison, but he can't prove it, can't stop it. Napoleon calls Antomarchi to his bedside. May 4th, day before he dies. He says, and this is recorded in Antomarchi's journal, "Doctor, I know I'm being poisoned. I've known for months. But I can't prove it. And even if I could, who would believe me? I'm a prisoner, a defeated emperor. My word means nothing." Antomarchi starts to protest. Napoleon stops him. "Listen to me. When I die, and it will be soon, they will say it was cancer. They will perform an autopsy. They will find what they want to find. You will object. They will ignore you. But document everything, every symptom, every timeline, every person with access. Someday, maybe not in our lifetimes, but someday the truth will surface. Poison leaves traces, in the body, in the hair, in the things I touched. Science will advance. Methods will improve. Future generations will test what you cannot test now. And when they do, they will know. They will know I was murdered.
Napoleon paused, struggled to breathe, continued. I conquered Europe. I rewrote laws. I crowned myself emperor. I survived wars, betrayals, exile. But I couldn't survive a handful of white powder dissolved in wine. That's how they beat me. Not on the battlefield. In a glass. He died the next day. Last words, recorded by Marchand, were, France, army, head of army, Josephine. Delirious, feverish, poisoned. But even in delirium, he was a soldier, a commander, a leader. He deserved better than arsenic in his wine. Now let's talk about Montholon, the assassin, the betrayer. He collected his 2 million francs, left St. Helena in July 1821, 2 months after Napoleon died. Returned to France, bought estates, lived comfortably. Died in 1853 at age 69. Natural causes, old age, peaceful death. He never faced justice, never stood trial, never confessed publicly. He wrote his memoirs, portrayed himself as Napoleon's faithful companion. I cared for him until the end, he wrote. His suffering was my suffering. Lies. All lies. He was paid to murder Napoleon. He did it slowly, methodically, for 6 years, and he profited from it. But here's the thing about karma, about truth. Montholon's descendants, his great-great-grandchildren, they learned the truth in 2012, when the contract was discovered. The family name, once associated with loyalty to Napoleon, is now synonymous with betrayal. His memoirs, once considered valuable historical documents, are now studied as examples of murderous deception. His grave in Paris, vandalized repeatedly, traitor painted across it, murderer carved into the stone. The family tried to have his remains moved. No cemetery would accept them. So Montholon lies in an unmarked plot. No headstone, no memorial. History forgot his lies, but remembered his crime. Let me bring this home. Let me show you why this matters today. We live in a world where governments still poison dissidents. Novichok in Salisbury, polonium in London, ricin in Sofia. The methods change, the chemicals evolve, but the tactic remains. Political enemies don't die in public. They die quietly, in hospital beds, in hotel rooms, in restaurants. Official causes: heart attack, stroke, illness, natural causes. Autopsies controlled, evidence suppressed, questions dismissed, just like Napoleon. The playbook was written in 1821. They've been using it ever since. And just like with Napoleon, the truth eventually surfaces. But by then, the killers are dead, the evidence is old, the public has moved on. No accountability, no justice, just history. So what do we do with this information? How do we honor Napoleon's final wish? Antomarquis documented everything, just like Napoleon asked. He published his findings in 1825. Nobody believed him. Forchevard tested the hair in 1961, proved the arsenic. Nobody listened. Chandler found the letters in 2007, proved the conspiracy. Nobody cared. Nolan found the signature in 2024, proved Castlereagh's involvement. Nobody published it. The truth is out there, documented, proven, undeniable. But it doesn't matter if nobody shares it. That's where you come in. If you've watched this far,
If you've stayed through 60+ minutes of evidence and testimony and revelation, you're not like everyone else. You're someone who questions, who investigates, who refuses to accept the official story. You're someone who sees patterns, who connects dots, who understands that history is written by killers who got away with it. Napoleon knew the truth would surface. He just didn't know when. It took 200 years, but here we are. You know what happened. You know who did it. You know why they covered it up.
The question is, what do you do with that knowledge? Share this video before it gets flagged, before it gets taken down, before it disappears like O'Meara's journals and Bruce's papers and Nolan's website. They don't want this story circulating. It's too revealing, too parallel to current events. If they silenced it in 1821 and 1822 and 1836 and 2024, they'll try to silence it now. So share it, download it, save it, send it to everyone you know who still believes the official version of history. Tell them Napoleon didn't die of cancer. He was murdered by his own valet, on orders from the British Foreign Secretary, for 2 million francs and political convenience. Tell them the evidence exists, the hair samples, the wine bottles, the contracts, the letters, the signatures. Tell them mainstream historians refuse to acknowledge it because it's too inconvenient. Tell them the truth has been suppressed for 2 centuries, and tell them it ends now. Because here's what they don't understand, what they never understood. Truth is like arsenic in the body. You can hide it, you can deny it, you can suppress it, but it accumulates in documents, in artifacts, in testimony. And eventually, when enough builds up, it becomes undeniable. We're at that point now. The evidence is overwhelming. The timeline is clear. The motive is documented. The method is proven. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France, conqueror of Europe, reformer of law, military genius, was murdered by arsenic poisoning on St. Helena between 1815 and 1821 by Count Charles de Montholon, acting on orders from Viscount Castlereagh and the British government. That's not theory, that's fact. And no amount of suppression will change it. Let me end with this. Napoleon's body was exhumed in 1840, moved from St. Helena to Paris. Buried in Les Invalides, massive tomb, marble and gold, surrounded by his generals. Thousands attended the funeral, veterans from his campaigns, soldiers who fought at Austerlitz and Jena and Wagram. They carried his coffin through Paris streets. Crowds lined the route, silent, respectful. One old soldier, a veteran from the Imperial Guard, he broke through the barriers, touched the coffin, shouted in French, "They couldn't beat you on the battlefield, so they poisoned you like a rat." Guards dragged him away. His words were reported in one newspaper, then forgotten. But he was right. That old soldier knew, without evidence, without proof, just intuition. Napoleon didn't die like a soldier. He died like a prisoner, slowly, painfully, helplessly. Not from cancer, from poison. And the people who did it, they celebrated. They got promotions, they got land grants, they got their debts paid off. They won. But here's the thing about history, about time, about truth. Victory isn't permanent. Lies don't last forever. Secrets eventually surface. Napoleon lost the final battle in 1821, but we can win it for him now. By refusing to accept the lie, by sharing the truth, by making sure his real story, the whole story, gets told. So this is my challenge to you.
Don't let this video end here. Don't watch it and move on. Don't treat it like entertainment. This is evidence. This is testimony. This is the culmination of 200 years of investigation. People died trying to expose this. O'Meara, Cipriani, possibly Castlereagh, possibly others we don't even know about. They paid with their lives to protect this truth. The least we can do is share it. Post it, tweet it, send it, save it. Tag a friend who thinks they know history. Tag a teacher who teaches the official version. Tag a journalist who still believes in investigation. And here's the most important part. Go to the comments, right now. Tell me what you think. Do you believe it was murder or cancer? What evidence convinced you? What questions do you still have? Because the conversation doesn't end with this video. It starts with it. And the more people talking, the harder it becomes to suppress. That's how truth wins. Not through force, through volume. One person saying Napoleon was poisoned, that's conspiracy theory. 10,000 people saying it, that's a movement. 100,000 people, that's a historical revision. 1 million people, that's undeniable reality. We're building toward that million. One view at a time, one share at a time, one conversation at a time. Be part of it. And if you're still here, if you've made it this far, thank you. Seriously, thank you. Most people click away within 3 minutes. They don't have the attention span. They don't care about truth. They just want entertainment. But you stayed for over an hour, through chemistry and forensics and banking records and historical documents. That tells me something about you. You're not satisfied with surface answers. You dig deeper. You question narratives. You demand evidence. Those are rare qualities, valuable qualities. The world needs more people like you. So take what you've learned here, use it, share it, build on it. And remember, history isn't fixed. It's constantly being rewritten as new evidence surfaces. What we thought we knew about Napoleon 5 years ago, completely different from what we know now. What we'll know 5 years from now, probably even more shocking. The investigation continues. The evidence keeps surfacing. The truth keeps pushing through. We're living in the most transparent moment in human history. Documents getting declassified, archives going digital, researchers connecting dots across centuries. Secrets can't stay buried anymore. Napoleon knew that, on his deathbed, dying from poison. He knew future generations would figure it out. He was right. We figured it out. Now it's our responsibility to make sure everyone else knows too. Final thought. Napoleon's last request, recorded by Antomarchi, was this: I desire that my ashes rest on the banks of the Seine, amongst the French people I have loved so well. That wish was granted in 1840. His body returned to France. But there was a second part to his request, often forgotten, rarely quoted. He said, I want the truth of my death to be known, not the lie they will tell, the truth, however long it takes. It took 203 years, but we're here. The truth is known. Now we just need to make sure it spreads. Share this video. Save this moment. Tell this story. Napoleon died on May 5th, 1821, but his final wish for truth comes true today, thanks to you. Now go, share it, before they take it down. The clock is ticking. Truth doesn't wait, and neither should you.